You know a movie is about to be very good when the very first scene is Vin Diesel getting broken out of a prison bus. And Fast 5 definitely didn't disappoint. And as I'm sure you're expecting by now, Fast 5 has some seriously unbelievable rides. And I'm gonna take you through the cost of every one of those sick whips driven by Brian, Dom, Han, and all your favorite characters. And if you're new here, I'm Brad Danger. Smash that subscribe button and turn on that notification bell. Oh, and also, this video is sponsored by our friends Squarespace. So, buckle up, let's go. So we're gonna start off with probably the greatest flex in history for the Fast and Furious franchise. And we all know that they all flex more than Hulk Hogan. Brother. So this one is pretty big. All right, I'll put that away. You see, Universal Studios didn't buy just one. They bought two Koenigsegg CCXRs. And in case you didn't know, only 4 of these cars were ever made. And as they said in the movie, the Fast and Furious literally had 50% of all the CCXRs in the world. And as you can imagine, cars this rare carry a very hefty price tag. MSRP on the CCXR is roughly 2 mil. But unlike most rare cars, the market value on these elusive supercars seem to be going down. Estimates are now around 1.5 million. And that is not a half, but a whole Rolls-Royce Phantom in depreciation. So that's kind of a poor investment on Universal Studios' part. And as you probably know, Koenigsegg is known for making some of the most dazzling supercars ever built. But the next expensive supercar comes from a very unlikely source. Because Lexus is known for making super high luxury performance vehicles. And you don't really think of them as a builder of super high-end futuristic supercars. That is with the exception of the LFA. Han is seen blazing down the Autobahn near the end of the film in his 2011 LFA, which is capable of spitting out 533 horsepower out of probably the best sounding acoustic 4.8 liter V10 engine ever made. And the LFA is worth somewhere around $400 or so thousand odd dollars, partly because it's really the only supercar that Lexus ever produced, and maybe they ever will. And plus, they only made 500 of them. Now, there is some good news on the horizon because Lexus representatives did say that they may produce another supercar in the future, but there are no certain immediate plans for one, so the LFA is all we got. Lexus made an instant classic with this V10 supercar, and it almost seems like they actually built this LFA just because they wanted to prove that they could. And the next car is a homologation special that is pretty expensive as well. And the Porsche 996 GT3 RS is definitely one of the cooler cars in the movie. And you may have missed it, but well, I'm definitely biased because I love the 911 and I own a 996, so sue me. But seriously, the 996 GT3 RS is one of the most raw GT cars that Porsche has ever made. And with lighter body panels, thanks to some carbon fiber on the hood and rear wing, its motorsports counterpart won the GTO class in the 2001 British GT Championships, with only 140 right-hand made production models of the car ever built. Plus, the 996 GT3 RS was never sold in the United States or Canada, making them especially rare on this side of the Atlantic. Now, the original price of the 996 GT3 RS was $175,000, but they'd probably fetch more like 150 grand or so in today's market. And while the Porsche 911 is a marvel of German engineering, the producers of Fast 5 also felt that they needed to throw in a JDM legend. So what better than a 2003 ACURA NSX. And that badass black NSX, it was heavily modified with NSXR suspension, brakes, wheels, body mods, and more. This black Japanese Panther is right-wheel drive and puts out 295 horsepower through a 6-speed manual transmission, which, if you want to save the manuals, snag our best-selling Ideal T. And while a stock 2003 NSX is gonna cost you roughly 100 grand today, with all that modding, you're gonna spend at least 120 grand on this car. And while the next car on this list isn't quite as expensive as the blacked out NSX, it certainly has that classic Italian appeal to it. Now, it may not come as a surprise, but a lot of people in the US have never heard of the Italian car maker, TOMASO. And just laying your eyes on a Pantera, you might even think it was an American muscle car. In fact, this car actually featured a Ford Cleveland V8 in the 1972 model, and it was sold through Lincoln Mercury dealerships here in the US. Now, the GTS was the more race-minded version of the original. However, for some reason, this car has been reported to overheat on a 75-degree day. way. They just don't have the cooling for that big V8. And apparently engine fires are especially common on the PANTERA GTS as well. I mean, I wouldn't want to race in that death trap. And a real 1972 PANTERA GTS is going to cost you around 75,000 bucks. And the producer of Fast 5 did get a real one. But they also had to get several replicas for when the real one inevitably overheated during the filming of the train scene. Yeah, how crazy is that? Well, it's almost as crazy as the next car on our list, which is easily the most expensive. And before we get into it, I want to tell you about our friends over at Squarespace, who sponsored this video. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a website and run your business on. And not only do they have award-winning templates, but what I love is their 24/7 support. Plus, no matter what industry you're in, you can build it with Squarespace. And it's so simple to use. I mean, if I can do it, you definitely can do it too. And plus, they also sell domain names as well. So if you're not ready to build a website, but you have an awesome domain name, there's no better time than now to go snag it for when you're ready. So head over to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/idealmedia to get 10% off either the website or the domain. And I've linked to it down below. And thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring today's video. All right. I should mention that none of the 1963 Corvette Grand Sports used in the film are real. Instead, they had 5 replicas made of this absolute classic, with some very interesting modifications made to them. And if you know anything about classic cars, you know that modifying one is about the worst thing you can do to its value. So if you make a few modifications to a real 63 Corvette Grand Sport with an auction value of $10 million, it's gonna be suddenly worth about half that, no matter how much you spend on mods. So it's a very good thing that the ones used in the movie were fake. And the next car that I'm gonna tell you about, well, it's probably the hero in the movie. And it might surprise you how little it actually costs. You see, Dom Toretto and Dodge Charger go together like peanut butter and jelly. Big muscly dude and big muscly car. And I mean, come on. How badass is that gigantic blower on the hood of his 70 Charger RT? They used 6 total Charger RTs for the film, and one was actually hooked up with a blown 528 cubic inch Hemi V8. And the other ones, well, they weren't as badass because they had LS3 V8s in them, which made it a lot more simpler of a platform. And the production crew sought out the best RTs that they could find. But even a pristine example of this car would only cost roughly 55,000 bucks. And that's even with the blower. But as far as we know, the RT with the Hemi engine was really the only real model. The rest were all just replicas. And the film also featured 2 2010 Dodge Charger SRT8s that Dom and Brian used to break into the police vault. Both are finished in matte black and hooked up with some other cool mods like roll cages, XD Rockstar wheels, and chassis reinforcement. Now, a normal 2010 Charger SRT8 probably goes for around 30,000 bucks, but with all those mods, we're guessing that the Fast and Furious production team spent more like 50 grand. And the police chase scene is simply riddled with Chargers because the cops are driving 2006 Charger LXs with the police package installed, of course. These whips are probably worth somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 grand. So we're gonna say that all in, the Chargers in Fast 5 probably cost somewhere around $175,000. And next up, we have another well-known American name that's worth up to $2 million for a real one, that is. In Fast 5, the role of the car containing the computer chip that lets the crew in on Hearn and Ray's little $100 million secret is played by a 1966 Ford GT40. It should make you happy to know that the car used in the film was not a real 1966 GT40, which could go at auction for as much as $2 million. But rather, it was a replica built for the film, and one that I would still totally get behind the wheel and rip on. Now, replicas are not cheap on these GT40s, and the one they used is a pretty expensive kit, but how much they cost exactly? Well, we're not too sure. But there are still a few more cars that cost a good chunk of change. And the next two actually raced against each other. Now, if you stayed till the end of the movie, in the very last scene before the credits, Brian challenges Dom to a rematch. And Dom's got his 2009 Challenger SRT8, and Brian's got his 2010 Nissan GT-R R35. While we never actually got to see the race since the credits cut in before they start, I think that we can all agree that that would have been a very fun matchup to watch. I'd say that Brian had the edge in terms of top speed because the R35 can top out 23 miles per hour faster than Dom's Challenger. But we all know Dom has a couple of tricks up his sleeve, even though he's wearing a sleeveless shirt. And with some fancy driving, he probably could have pulled it out. And yes, I guess we'll never know. But what we do know is that both of these cars are worth roughly $45,000 a piece. So after they initially break Dom out of the prison bus, Dom, Brian, and Mia all head down to South America. And while Dom drives his Charger, Brian rolls south in something a bit more rare, a 71 Nissan Skyline GT-R KPGC 10. This was the first ever Skyline to bear the GT-R badge. And because of its rich history, these cars can go for as much as $150,000 today. And while that covers most of the major cars in this film, there are a few honorable mentions that I want you to be aware of. You had a Mark IV Supra that's worth roughly 60,000 bucks, a Nissan 370Z worth about 10 grand, a little WRX STI worth 20 or so grand, a Ford Galaxy 500 XL worth about 20 grand, a VW Touareg at about 5 grand and going down fast, and a Mazda 626 GF worth about 4 grand. And altogether, that's about 120K on Universal's bill. So there you go, the cost of every car from Fast 5. And by far, my favorite vehicle from this film was the GT40. What was yours? Let us know down below. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button for the YouTube algorithm. And if you're new here, please subscribe and turn on that notification bell. I'm Brad Danger, this is Ideal, and keep living the ideal lifestyle.